Hey, so welcome everybody. This is a webinar on things we have in the chemistry group here at Carnegie Mellon that might be of use to people. There's two main projects we'll be talking about. The longest standing one is the ChemCollective, which is has quite a few different types of things, but I suspect most people will be interested in the virtual labs. But we've also, over the past 2 years, shifted our focus to creating a fully online course. And it embeds where a lot of what's in the ChemCollective, and the plan over the next 6 months or so is to really move most of our content from the ChemCollective site into the OLI course, but we're not there all the way. From the perspective of the virtual labs, the ones I'll be showing later in the webinar are labs that are auto-graded, and that means they get random samples so that students can't sort of tell each other the answer because it's different every time you load the lab. The OLI course has virtual labs in it, but they are not randomized, so the answer is always the same. And not all of the labs are in the OLI course yet. So, but we want to start off with a brief overview of the OLI course. So I'll pass it off to Sandy Razor, my collaborator here at Carnegie Mellon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen here and toggle back and forth between our PowerPoint presentation and then jump into the OLI course to show you that. So just real quick on the agenda for today, we'll look at the OLI general chemistry courseware. I will give you a link to a page that walks you through how to get access to the course. And then Dave will talk about the ChemCollective virtual lab activities, and then we'll take feedback and questions. Along the way, also feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, and during the presentation as well is fine. Just real quickly about the Open Learning Initiative, if you're not familiar. It's an organization here at Carnegie Mellon University. It started in 2002 with a mission to develop and disseminate online instruction that is developed through an integration of technology and the science of learning, with a goal of improving student learning and also providing information to instructors about the student learning. And we'll dig into that in a little bit more detail in just a minute. The general chemistry course is divided into 2 semesters, the way that traditionally general chemistry is. So these are kind of the main topics covered in General Chemistry 1 and General Chemistry 2. The content is movable from one semester to the other, just for future reference there. Some of the courseware features, which we're going to jump right in and take a look at all of these, but it is fully integrated, meaning that you have text, you have work examples, you have practice problems all throughout. There's some embedded videos and interactives and simulations, and it's all works together. The student doesn't have to jump around between different places to do their homework or read their textbook or take a quiz. It's all together for them. It's very interactive, as you'll see. The OLI courses in general really focus on this concept of learning by doing. And we'll take a look at that. There's a large variety of the activities and media. We'll look at the way that the activities are scaffolded and the way that they provide targeted feedback. There are virtual lab activities within the courseware, as Dave mentioned. They are not randomized like the ones on the ChemCollective site. There are some adaptive assessments as well. And at the end of the modules, there are summative assessments, quizzes. The instructor gets feedback on how the students are performing in the learning dashboard, and we will take a quick look at that as well. So we're gonna just jump right in here to a course because it's much easier.
It felt reasonable.
I'm sorry. Did somebody have a question, or maybe their mic was just on and they were talking to somebody else? Okay. Okay, so this is the second semester content, and I'm going to jump into our general equilibrium module here. Oh no, actually that wasn't the one I wanted to jump into. Actually, I wanted to get into the equilibrium calculations. So, discussed there that it is integrated and highly interactive. So you see that here we have a couple of worked examples, and then pretty quickly the students, jump right into some activities. The activities start out scaffolded, meaning that, they're kind of stepped through the process. So for this first example here, they're going to choose the correct, or try to choose the correct equilibrium expression. They do get specific feedback on if they choose an incorrect answer, why their answer is incorrect. So once they get the correct answer, then they're going to do their calculation here. If they get an incorrect answer on the first try, they are given some information as to how to get the correct answer. And on a second incorrect input, they do get the full solution. So some of the activities are scaffolded in the way that they're structured, kind of taking the student through in a step-by-step way. And some of the activities are scaffolded using hints. So this one gives the students a couple of hints that they can use to get to the correct answer. Again, with incorrect answer choices, they're given specific feedback as to why their answer is incorrect. The pages generally flow in this process where they start with learn by doing or scaffolded activities, and then they move to unscaffolded activities. So in your unscaffolded activities, or the did I get this activities, they don't have the hints. It isn't presented in a kind of step-by-step way, but many of them are numeric input, not all of them. But on an incorrect answer input the first time, again, they get some information as to how to get the correct answer. And on a second incorrect input, they do get the full solution. Just in a similar way, and just to kind of show you another page and kind of how this unfolds. Again, relatively small amount of text, a work example, and then that moves us into a learn by doing, a scaffolded problem. Here we're scaffolding the development of the ICE table before they finally calculate KC. Similar scaffolding here as well. And again, moving to unscaffolded problems. We do have some interactives and simulations embedded as well. These interactive examples, so as opposed to kind of your typical textbook worked example, which are very helpful. This is a different type of worked example, and that the student has the strategy here on the left, And as they click through, they see the problem unfold. Another interactive that we have in the course are the Phet Simulations. So I wanted to show you an example of that. So we've incorporated pretty much all of the Phet simulations that are in HTML5. So with all of these simulations, the students have directions for an activity to do with it. Generally speaking, as is with this one, they're going to work through these steps and fill in answers from the simulation. And then that follows up with some type of interpretation of that data that they're getting from the simulation. At the end of each of the modules, just jump to the end of this module, I guess, since we're here. At the end of each of the module, there's a short summary of the module, and then also a quiz and a My Response activity. So the My Response activity takes the learning objectives from the particular module and asks the student to reflect on how well they think they're doing, and also has these open answer questions that the student can, direct some questions to the instructor. And the instructor then gets this information back to them. The virtual lab activities are embedded in the first semester content. And I'm going to pull that up real quickly here. Let me pull that up for you.
While you're looking for that, let me just jump in and say that the way we've been using the OLI course in my course at Carnegie Mellon as kind of do this before you come to class. Now that we're going online, my plan is to make a short video that sets up the OLI, so you tell them, so you set the thing in context. Then they'll go through the OLI, which does all of the instruction in probably better detail than I could do by just talking about it and trying to write on a whiteboard. But then afterwards, I will do my own customization and sort of reflect back on what they should know and set up the problems that we'll be doing, and we're turning the recitations into sort of live office hours where they do problems together. So I think it might be useful for people who are thinking that they're going to record themselves talking at the board to say, well, I'll do some of that, but I'll also, for these, why not use something that's sort of put together in a coherent way. And then that page at the end where they get to say, what do they know and not know, and what are their questions, that also is a way to gather information on what you can do together when you have your online meeting as a class. And the quiz that's there, that we use in the way we used to use sampling online homework and say you had to do this online homework before a certain date. Now we replace that with the quiz, which is so similar style questions as to what you would see in sampling.
I got one question here. What does the abbreviation Phet stand for? I should know that, but I'm really not sure. The Phet project is out of the University of Colorado in Boulder, and it's an OER resource, but I'm not exactly sure what.
I forget what it was. Yeah, it's the one. Yeah, I should say also that this course, the OLI, it's an open educational resource, and that we incorporated a lot of other people's free work into it. So we sort of assembled what we thought was the best stuff and then added and filled again so it was complete. So a lot of the text is taken from OpenStax. I don't know if anyone's using the OpenStax textbook.
I don't know how to, I don't know how to put my, some people have their thing there, and I don't know if I do that or not, but it's a Zoom. Have you ever used Zoom?
Oh, hello.
It's not.
It sounds like someone's having technical problems with Zoom.
Okay, so I think we could, I just wanted to jump into the course and show you the virtual labs that are within the course. As I mentioned, or Dave mentioned, one of us mentioned, these are not randomized, so the students will have, all the students will have the same answers. Let me into this one. So another thing that's different about these as opposed to what's on the ChemCollective site, they do give a little bit more structure in that in many of them there's a procedure that the student can access. And then also as they go through the procedure and work through the virtual lab, there's this report sheet that they fill in as well. But again, these values would be the same for all of the students, which we recognize is not ideal, but that's what we have in there for now.
Yep, by next year they'll be randomized, but not this year.
Right. I think that is the main things I wanted to cover about the course. Let me provide you all with a link here.
Yeah, so the way I understand it, the course is free for use, but you have to request that. So there were some questions coming into the OLI help team about this. You will, somehow it's a two-step process. You have to ask for the free access, and then they give you the free access. But the help team is sort of available all the time right now, so the turnaround time should be really fast.
So I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is kind of a pretty detailed quick start guide that will tell you how to get into the OLI system and set up an account and set up a course for you to review. And then if you want to use it with your class, how you could set it up for your class as well. One thing I also wanted to show you in the course is the dashboard. So the instructor gets feedback. So all of those activities, as you saw, like there are many activities on all of the pages. The idea is that, there's a lot more activities, then it's just a lot of reading for the students. Again, the concept being there that students learn best by doing. So let me show you the dashboard here quickly. So the information that you'll get back from the students is in the form of the learning dashboard. Each of the learning objectives, which I meant to point out as we were in pages, maybe you noticed them, but there's learning objectives at the top of each of the pages. And the learning objectives are divided into sub-objectives as well. So you can get a general idea of, for the given learning objective, how the students are doing. You can click on these, and these aren't real students, but you can click on these and to see specifically, what students are doing well and which students are doing not as well. You could also look at the sub-objectives. So for this particular sub-objective, we can see the question associated with it and how the students did on that particular question. So this will give you some information that you can use to determine how best to intervene and help your students. I think we might have some questions here. No.
There's been a little bit of activity in the chat room. I'm trying to keep
Okay,
up on that.
gotcha. Okay, so any questions before Dave jumps into the virtual labs in some detail? Are there any questions on the OLI course?
Where is the link?
I will put it in again. And oh
I
no,
can't find it.
sorry about that. I think I accidentally made it private. So. Okay.
Okay.
Got it? oli.cmu.edu. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think the recording will have access to the chat room. So if you're watching this on a recording, we'll put something around it so you'll know what that link is. Great. Okay, so I guess we'll take a short breather to see if there's any questions. Raise your hand if you want to. Or actually just unmute yourself if there's not.
Yeah, somebody asked here, this is a good question. They're interested in using parts of the course, which I think would be likely for a lot of people because probably you're about halfway through or so, so you wouldn't necessarily need the full course. You can like just use some of the content when you set up your course, and that link that I gave you, there's directions in there for this, but you can, you know, pull out certain units or certain modules. And then, as I mentioned, there is also a way to like pull content. Maybe there's one unit in the first semester content that you want pulled in, you know, for your second semester content. That is doable as well.
Yeah, and it's also, you can set dates, due dates yourself within. So that's in my course, we've been doing a lot of that. So we have sort of everything's there in the course. You can create a syllabus when you create the course, say you have a restricted number of things, but we just pull in the entire Gen 2 course, and then we set dates of availability and due dates on quizzes. And that's our way of scheduling things.
Janet has a good question here about, are there restrictions for students in different countries? Not that I'm aware of, but I can double check on that for you and let you know. I
don't think they would be.
I know we use OLI in some other countries. I don't think there are, but I'll double check. Yeah,
I don't think there's any on our side, but we might be blocked in places like China. I'm not sure. I would assume we're not, but you never know.
Can you give an example of how you use some of the data you collect from the dashboard, and perhaps how that helps you in your teaching and what modifications you perhaps made because of that data?
Let me jump in from my perspective. There's sort of like the dashboard that gives you a general overview, and it's useful, but I think it's more useful when if you go through the course yourself. There's a way where you can look at a question and see how students responded to it. And so I like to just look through. So there's, on the whole class level, I find it most useful to look at questions and see how students did on those questions. And on the student level, you can click and just see like what's going on with each student. One thing that's really easy to tell is whether they just sort of went through it without really even answering any of the questions versus like actually engaged with the materials. But I'll let Sam
real quick to show you here. So in, you know, on the courses through your access, you have this little learning dashboard icon. Oh, and actually, let me share my whole screen because that comes up in a pop-up. Okay, so now you should be able to see it. When you click the learning dashboard icon, you can see specifically how students did. So, you know, if there's a particular problem that you see that, you know, a lot of students got the answer incorrect, then, you know, maybe that's one that you'd want to go over with them in class, you know, if you're meeting online. And yeah, that's what Dave was referring to there.
The other thing I think would probably be useful in this context, in this new, like, so the course is really designed to be with an in-person class. And so they do it before they come to class. And then I often put up a clicker question where they adjust the slider and it says, like, what do you know? Like, how comfortable are you with these things? And so I was doing it live, but the course also has embedded in it that kind of information. And I think you can get a sense from students on what they're most interested in having extra instruction on from those surveys that are in the course now.
Now, all that data feedback that you showed us and you use, is that an additional $25 cost per student to get that kind of data back?
In general, in the normal running of things, we've been charging 25 to, like, if you want to have a grade book and all that, and it's free if you just use this. We're trying to keep an open and free version that doesn't connect to the grade book. Is that right, Sandy?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But for this, for COVID-19, we're waiving the $25 fee, so it's free. And we came up with that $25 price based on what we thought it would cost to keep the server up and running and things. And we'll see how that goes over time. We are a nonprofit. We're just trying to get to a point where we are self-sustaining, because we discovered a lot through the ChemCollective that it's much easier to get grants to develop new things than it is to keep old things running. So that's our strategy, is just to try and raise enough money to keep the thing afloat. But because of COVID-19, we're waiving the fee for ChemChem 1 and 2. So I think probably there's quite a few people here who are here for virtual labs, and let me show you our plan for that. So again, our long range plan is to move all the labs from ChemCollective into the OLI course, but we're not there yet. So and this crisis is sort of has us scrambling now to figure out what we're going to do. So let me show you a quick overview of the lab by doing one. So if you come to share. I'm sharing my whole screen, which hopefully is readable for people. If it's not readable, raise your hand and I'll switch over to just sharing an individual window. I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I'm going to go with this. So if you come to the ChemCollective site, you'll see that there's virtual labs listed here by type. So we have listed by topic, listed by type for people who are looking to use these materials because of their lab course, which I suspect is quite a few people. The auto-graded problems is probably the best place to look. And then in each topic, you'll see the labs we have available. And if you click on Get Info, you get a little bit more information about what that's all about. I just want to show you how one works. I'm going to do this metal density problem here. Oh, no, sorry, it's not the one I wanted to do the gravimetric analysis. So there's a video, and let me just also back up and say that we've created this shared Google Doc, and I'll put it into the chat window once more. And this has some advice on like a little bit of explanation. This video here is the one to share with your students to get them to understand how the lab works. And I'll highlight some of the extra features that are shown here. This is the one I mostly wanted to show, that we're trying to get help with people on which of these labs is actually useful and how we could go for you. So we're going to add a little section for each of our labs to this document. So like this one is creating a solution. So if you come in here and look at algorithmic problems, for each of these problems, we're going to create a little section here. And if you're planning on using it, just please put a note here that you are. And so if there's a couple people using it, you can all share experiences and we can figure out if it's working for people. And here's how the lab works. It was also, let me just also say that this lab was designed as a homework replacement, not as a lab replacement. We really wanted, our motivation for creating a virtual lab was we thought the homework that was just text and paper and pencil wasn't having students really connected to chemistry enough. And we have some evidence that students can solve paper and pencil problems and not really understand how it relates to chemistry. That's what we were going after. We weren't going after this is the replacement for this physical lab that you did. I know there's some other labs out there that are of that type. Labster, I think, is one, and a couple others. So if people want to share that information in this doc and everything, that's great. We're just trying to get people to find something that's really going to help them. Here's the way ours works. This is a solution with an unknown amount of silver chloride in it, silver nitrate in it. And it, every time I load the page, it will be a different concentration. So when we say randomized, we mean that for this instance, there's a specific number of grams in this. So if a student just sort of randomly guesses, they will eventually, after the third try, it will say, "Oh, you got it wrong 3 times in a row. You now need to reload the page." And it's the same problem, but the solution is different. So that's to prevent them from just randomly guessing to try and get the answer. So I'll bring on a solution. Here the experiment design is fairly simple. I'm just going to add sodium chloride. And I can try adding a gram at a time. As I do that, you can see there's solid forming in this beaker and this flask. And if I add more sodium chloride, no more forms. And so I now know I precipitated all the silver. I can then go 2.47. I have a document set up somewhere. So last time I did this, it made 2.43 grams. So 2.47 grams, this is the calculation that converts that over to how much silver nitrate must have been present to begin with. I can type that into here. 2.93. And hopefully if I didn't make a mistake, I come back here and put in 2.93. And it changes to this page. So this is how you know the students did it correctly. That it just reloads the page. In many cases, there's a print button here. In some cases, there's not, and they have to print the PDF. But if your students know how to print the PDF, they can do that. And then however you currently are planning on having students submit assignments, that's the way that the grading would work. So it's very low tech. The ChemCollective site doesn't have to store any information. It just, if they get it right, you'll notice that it has a timestamp up here so that you know when they did it, and if 2 students did exactly at the same time, you would know that they cheated. Also, if you see the same number, it's very likely that they kind of shared it. We have noticed a CMU student once changed the timestamp using a PDF editor. We sort of noticed, and then so shocks me that students would go through that effort instead of just solving the problem. The let me show you a couple user interface things. I'll just go to the default lab for this. So I mostly want to show you the main problem students have, or users have, I mean. You would think that that would start pouring. So to pour this into that, you have to drag it, but you have to drag it until the thing you're dragging onto lights up. That's, once students know that, everything else is fairly intuitive. It's especially a problem when you're using a burette. So if I go to glassware here and I pull out a burette, people will do this and they'll be like, how come it's not working? It really has to be that your mouse has to be over the thing. So it's when the mouse goes over the target that it lights up. If I grab it up here, to get it to light up, I have to go all the way down to there. But once they know that, I think the whole thing is fairly intuitive, and you can see what happens. What else should I say? The over here, if I bring out this was a mode that we added partly for high school chemistry, that you can switch this from grams to moles to molarity. For college, I think most people work in molarity through the whole course. We noticed in high school that they often do a lot of the things just with grams and moles without going into concentration, which is why we added that feature. There's also thermochemistry that's supported, and there you can right-click on a flask and insulate it from the surroundings, and that's just the way to not have to always be using the calorimeter. So if I were to heat this thing up, it would act as if it was an isolated flask.
Okay, we have a question here about the print page. Does that have the student's name or any kind of identifying information?
No, not currently. So we just have the timestamp, and that's all. So if they email it to you, you can at least check to see that it's not something that they got from somewhere else, like they did it at the right time, and it's not the same as some other student in the class. Yeah, and iPads it should work fine on an iPad. It's HTML5. Oh wait, touch is not working. Is that right? Sandy, do you know if it's we'll have to check and see how difficult it is on an iPad. So Chromebook, we know for sure it works. We have to check and see what the iPad situation is.
I thought we had people that used tablets when we were in the lab over the summer with the.
I think so. If anyone has an iPad,
I thought that it does work, but it was a little bit glitchy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
With these tablets.
Yeah, it's better on a laptop or a Chromebook. I guess what type, people wanted to type just into the chat window, give us a sense of what kind of labs how many people are looking or came here because they were thinking of using this as for their lab courses, this would put their labs online. So on one hand, yeah. Well, not quite as many as I thought, or not quite as many people are finding the raise hand button in time. The actually, let me pass it off to Bob Belford, who's in the chat. It is in the webinar right now, and he's been a major developer of interesting uses of the virtual lab software, and I think he has a lot of additional labs other than the ones that are just up here on the ChemCollective that I hope he'll be sharing to this Google Doc. But Bob, do you want to?
Sure. Let me. Yes, I've been using the ChemCollective on and off. I think since 2001 or so,
Yeah.
and we use it in our general chemistry for post and pre-labs. And I can share my activities, and what I'm going to be doing is pivoting my activities over to the real lab because my school shut down. We're completely online. Right now I'm running them out of LibreText, but if we do it here, I think we should run them out of ChemCollective. And I can easily show you the ones I do if you want, Dave. I will just have to share my screen.
Yeah, why don't you show the one that you have the big set of unknowns? I like that one. Or if there's another one.
Okay, let me. Okay, so can I share a screen here? Is my screen being shared?
Not yet.
It's not. If you mouse,
Oh,
yep,
there you go.
it is. Yep,
Yep.
yeah. Just real quick, Bob, before
Yeah,
you
it's
get
fine.
started. Janet and any others that had the question about students using the OLI content in different countries. So I just messaged the director of OLI, and that is the information I got back from him. So he said, well, the beginning of that was not formally, but some countries have issues we can't get around. China has a firewall that slows down or blocks connections to YouTube. We do have some YouTube videos within the course, as many OLI courses have, but not a ton, and not any really that would make it so that you really couldn't use the course. They do have a server. OLI has a server in the EU, and working on a server in China. So that's the information I got for that.
Okay, I've got several different ones. This is an interesting one that might be of interest to you. The students, the virtual lab calculates free energy. And so we sort of, they're given an unknown, and each one of my labs has 28 unknowns. There's 14 here and another 28 there. And the students calculate the concentration of a saturated solution at 2 temperatures. And from that, they can calculate the enthalpy, entropy, and free energy. First, they get the equilibrium constant, then the free energy. And so that's one of them that I do that I could share. I have a diprotic acid one. I have a titration of a solid acid, which is, now realize these are post labs, but this is very interesting because they determine the gram equivalent weight in the real lab. And in that lab, we have to design the experiment for them. In the virtual lab, they got to figure out, they don't know what the acid is. Excuse me, these are knowns, but they're given an unknown. And they have no idea what their unknown is, so they actually have to do some initial exploratory work to figure out what quantity they want to titrate. And I can share with you the handouts. Now, because I don't teach this class all the time, most of my stuff are just handouts like Word documents that the TAs give to them or other instructors use. I used to have a website up, but with all honesty, I don't teach this class all the time. And therefore, I have to make what I do easy for other faculty to use. My thought, Dave, was you've been sharing this document here for, did I lose it? For us to make comments in labs. And what might be really of use is if we had a Google Doc that multiple of us who are trying to teach these in the classroom can share experiments that we use. And that way maybe we could collaboratively develop actual experiments.
That's great. Yeah, I was thinking that might be even more useful. Well, let me add a section for that to the document right now of, if you are looking for a lab.
And what I'm going to have to do is pivot my post-lab and pre-lab activities. We also have a diprotic acid lab that titration. We've got the titration of an acid with a base and a base with an acid. So I think it would be really useful if a bunch of us cooperatively or collaboratively showed what we were doing and shared experiments. But and the unknowns, I do have the keys for them, but each lab has a different number of unknowns and we permute them. Now, if you can do it with your random thing, that's better. As Dave can testify, I think most of these are about a decade old, aren't they?
Yeah, they were ported to HTML5, but but the design of them goes back a ways. Yeah. Oh, let me also add, there was a question earlier in the chat about it doesn't seem to be any procedures. And so that was somewhat intentional. Like we have a simulation environment. We have a way to enter answers in most cases, or in some cases. There's also a lot of labs that aren't auto-grading, and it's just a simulation. But and that means that people are free to write their own side documents that would be the same as if you were going to write some sort of supporting document for an actual physical lab, where you might give them a procedure. Like when Sandy put the virtual labs into Chem 1, she chose to provide a lot more support in terms of the procedure and have them sort of do one step and input their answer, and we check that, and the input next we check that. So that that's another thing that might be good for people to share. If people create some sort of document to help guide their students through the lab, why duplicate the work on that type of thing?
But if anybody's at the point where they're doing titrations, I'll be more than glad to share my work and they can adapt it as they like.
Yeah, so I added a section here. If you're looking for a lab, please post that request here. And that means that people can jump in and say, yeah, I have one. It can be even outside, it doesn't matter if it's one of ours or somewhere else. But we have most of the standard things kind of covered: titrations, gravimetric analysis, determine the heat of a reaction. The one thing we can't do, so the virtual lab simulation itself is a free energy simulator, so it's just equilibrium. All reactions immediately go to equilibrium, so there's no kinetics. Although we do have a kinetics tutorial on the website that I'll post. And like for some of these things that the virtual lab can't do, we created external ones. Like we have an electrochem one, we have a kinetics one, and I'll also post those in this list. And they're also listed underneath those categories.
It looks like Lenny has a question.
Oh, yeah.
Lenny, did you have a question?
Oh, that might have been, it might have been his hand. Hey, Lenny, how are
Sorry,
you?
yeah, no, I'm sorry.
That was your hand up still from saying you're looking for lab replacement, right?
Anne had a question in the chat. Dave, are you seeing that? Redox titration?
Yeah, I don't know, Bob, do we have any?
I don't know of any. I haven't done any.
That's one that would not be hard for us to sort of make, but yeah, that's not a specific acid we have. We tend to have ones where it's identified the acid and its concentration. And we have different levels of that. There's one where it could be either weak or strong. That's a little more challenging than the interweak acid, because you also, in addition to Yeah, if you just assume it's a weak acid and you take the half equivalence point to get the pKa, you'll be wrong if it's a strong acid. And so what experiment do you do to determine whether it's weak or strong is interesting. And that we tended to go for that. Since we were going after homework replacement, we were tending to go for those conceptual, like things that would push students to think more conceptually about what's going on. So I'd like to open it up for questions. We have about 7 minutes left in the scheduled time, and we can stay a little later, but I want to be respectful of people's time.
I wanted to put my email. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me.
That's good.
So I just put my email address in the chat. In terms of setting up a course with OLI, the OLI staff, is very aware of the situation, just with chemistry, but they have other courses as well. So they're there to help you also, but feel free to reach out to me with any questions.
Can I ask a question? This is Bob. I haven't, I've used the virtual lab a lot, not the OLI, but I'm thinking of using it. Do we have to give you our student names, or do we load the students themselves? And do we have to get IRB approval?
You do not need IRB approval. You don't need the student names. You can set up OLI through your LMS, and somebody from OLI Tech has to contact someone from your tech side, and I'm not exactly sure what they do, but they get it set up. Once you set up your course, they get the course set up in the LMS, and then your students just go to the LMS like they do for other things, and there'll be a link there that they click on, takes them right there. Or alternately, they can sign up and register in OLI, and then you would give them a course key that you determine when you set up your course. All of that information, let me put that link in again, but all of that information, this little startup adoption page that OLI has is real helpful for that.
Yeah, we use it, and we did not integrate it into Canvas. We found that it's just easy enough to, if you don't go through that step, what happens is you get a code that you tell the students, they can account themselves, put in the code, and when they make an account, no matter in which context for the IRB, they are asked if they want to opt into having their data used to improve the course, or whether they'd rather not. And you don't know, and we don't know what they're selecting on that. So it's totally behind the scenes. They can opt, and at any point, if they do decide that it's okay to use their data, they can opt out of that at any point.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I see. OLI is a project at Carnegie Mellon. This is a question: what's the difference between OLI and ChemCollective? ChemCollective is a website that just my group has been hosting for many years, and it's not as it just has virtual labs posting, and it uses this somewhat primitive approach of if they get it correct, it changes to a correct page. They print that out and submit it to you. OLI is a much bigger project, creating online course materials across many domains, and we've made a general chemistry 1 and 2 course in the Open Learning Initiative. It is really aimed at serving the role that your textbook and online homework system. So that's like a replacement for textbook and online homework. And I think it's much better than a textbook. I know with my students, I've done the experiment in the past of saying, read this chapter before class and we'll have a quiz. And they hate that, and your FCs suffer tremendously if you do that, in my experience. Whereas with the OLI course, we had them doing that, and they liked it. They thought it was great. So OLI is that sort of textbook online homework, get them ready. I think for online, moving online, I think it's really, I hope, a good idea because I think it's much better than you could create by just filming yourself on a whiteboard. And ChemCollective is mostly useful now for virtual labs and tutorials.
And just one more thing about OLI that may be of interest to folks, probably not right now if you're needing to adopt to, you know, get students online really quickly, but potentially for future use, that OLI does have an authoring platform as well. So the course is fully editable. So you could add questions in, you could take questions out, you could add your own videos. A lot of instructors have their own videos they've already created. So, you know, you might want to put your video on a particular page that is doable within the authoring platform. But like I said, that is a bit time consuming. So like I said, if you're looking to, you know, and the content that is there, you know, covers everything. So, but you might want to think about that for future reference.